a student, you have a huge amount to learn. And everyone needs a strategy, a method, a technique, something that will enable them to take material from a page to the brain. If you do not have such a strategy, you're up against a brick wall. It's like you're handicapped to a degree. You're unable to take in the information that you have to take in, and you find yourself disadvantaged. You begin to avoid certain courses and find that you cover for yourself, and you settle for something less than what could be. What you need is a way of paying attention, a way of capturing your wandering mind. And to do this, we use questions. When a question is asked, your mind is at full alert. Try this. What were you doing at 11 a.m. yesterday? Hit pause. Take a moment and try to recall. Maybe it was something memorable, maybe not. Now, either way, you will notice that you are actively engaging the mind. Questions do this. Now, who has all the answers to the test? Well, you probably said the teacher, but so do you. You have all the answers at hand. Some say that as much as 60 to 90% of your mark comes from tests. And the questions on tests come from your textbook, handouts, and notes that you've taken. Teachers make up questions from these materials. So what you need to do is think like a teacher. Think like those who make up the test. All you need to do is turn statements into questions. And it's pretty easy to do. You see, teachers make up questions from the course materials, the same course materials that in fact you have. And it's easy to make up questions. If a statement said, the sky is blue, well, what's the question? Answer, what color is the sky? Here's an example from a textbook. It's the short story. As an art form, the short story began in the 18th century by Daniel Defoe, who wrote a realistic ghost story. Well, there's a lot of statements in here. Let's take a look. Here's the statement. As an art form, the short story began in the 18th century. What's the question? Answer, when SS art form, SS short story began? Answer, 18th century. Our reading goes on to say by Daniel Defoe. So, what's our question? The answer, who began SS art form? Answer, Daniel Defoe. It goes on to say, who wrote a realistic ghost story? So, what's our question? And the answer is, what did Daniel Defoe do? And the answer to that question would be, wrote a realistic ghost story. Now you can do this. You gather together all of your course materials, and then you mine those materials for important statements and turn them into question-answer pairs. You select important information, line by line. You then create question-answer pairs that can then be encoded on the brain. When you see a question on a test, it's already connected to an answer in the brain. Later in the course, I'll show you how to make that connection so strong that when you see the question, it immediately prompts the answer. But first, we need to learn to manage questions. How do we do this? Here's the first method. We've gathered all of our course materials and mined them for questions. And we've created question-answer pairs. So what is the best way to manage this? How do we best encode this on the brain? The answer is, we use cue cards. Cue cards, question cards, commonly called flashcards. Here's how it works. We have the cards, and on the front of the cards we have a question, a single question. On the back of the cards we have the answer. Now this is very important. One question per card. I've seen students write lots of information on a card. That's not what you want. You want a question, because a question makes your mind work. You have to think, what's the answer? One question per card. Suppose the statement was, George Washington is the first president of the United States. Well, the question would be, first pres. Notice the shorthand. It's not even a complete sentence, I suppose. And on the back of the card you have the answer, George Washington. I emphasize one question on the front of the card, the answer on the back of the card. Now, the answer may have many parts, but there's a single question on the front. Let's look once again at our example from the short story, from an English textbook. The statement, as an art form, the short story began in the 18th century by Daniel Defoe, who wrote a realistic ghost story. If we were using cue cards, the first statement is the short story began in the 18th century. On the front of a card, we write, when did SS art form begin? On the back of that card, we write 18th century. The next statement is by Daniel Defoe. So our question becomes, who began SS as art form? And on the back of that very card, we have Daniel Defoe. The next statement is, who wrote a realistic ghost story? Any one of these could be questions on an exam. Our question on the card is, what did Daniel Defoe do? And the answer on the back, wrote a realistic ghost story. Now, sometimes you look at the amount of material you have to learn, and it really is overwhelming. But if you use these cue cards, you will find that they slow you right down, and you're able to pay attention to the detail. There's no rushing. You have everything in bite-sized chunks. It's very manageable. You can do it, and you are not overwhelmed anymore. So from now on, you will have a strategy. You will know exactly what you need to do. But doesn't that mean I'll have lots and lots of cards? Yes, of course it does. But it also means that you have every answer on the test. When you see a test question, you will find the answer already connected to it in the brain, and we'll be showing you how later in this course. Now, here's what else you can put on cards. You can put vocabulary words. The word on the front of the card, its meaning on the back. You can put pictures. Because of computers, you can print them out, cut them out, and tape them on a card. Suppose you wanted to learn flags of countries. You could tape the flags on the front, then the country on the back. You could put any kind of a formula on cards. Here are some quick snappers. 6 useful tips for flashcards. First of all, when do I make the cards? And the answer is during your study time. You sit quiet during your time, you have your material open, and in that time, during your study time, you make your cards. How do I learn the cards? And the answer, 5 at a time. You've made them up, spend time learning the 5. And then do 5 more, shuffle them all together, and you have 10. Then do 5 more. When you know those 5, shuffle them into the other 10. You now have 15, and so forth. The big secret, review during times of waiting. You're waiting for a friend. You're waiting in a doctor's office. You're waiting for supper. You're waiting in line. During these times that are usually just wasted, you take out your cards and you begin to review. Where do you store the cards? And the answer is in sandwich bags. You take the sandwich bags and you label them. You take the cards and you put the cards in bags. Here's chapter 1 of history. Here's chapter 3 of my math book. Here's a great tip. Go for a walk with your cards. When you're walking, the blood is flowing through your body. You are alert. It is probably one of the best times to review and go over your cards. Now, when you know a card well, take it out of the pile and set aside so that you concentrate on the cards you don't know well. Let's review. Gather all the materials you need. Take those materials, start at the beginning, and start to find question-answer pairs. Read each paragraph. Mine the material to find those important statements. What could be on a test? Create that question-answer pair from the information, and then put them on cue cards. On the front of the card, you have the question. On the back of the card, you have the answer. A single question on the front, the answer on the back that may have several parts. Very good to read the question and answer aloud. When you read the question aloud, you can actually hear it. You hear then the right answer being read too. Do this for each chapter. In the next video, we'll look at another way to manage your questions.